welcome everyone. This is Anissa Avon with Turnkey Coaching and Development Solutions. We are excited to get started today on our topic of succession planning, making the most of your talent, which I think those of you who have spoken to or sent us an email said this is a very timely conversation because typical succession planning is being somewhat turned up on its head, so to speak, on its ear. And I'm excited that we have an expert on the matter today. So, Donna, if you will, go ahead and click on over to our next slide, and we're just going to jump right on in. So my name is Anissa Avon. I'm the CEO and founder of Turnkey Coaching and Development Solutions. We have been providing enterprise learning and development and organizational development solutions since 2004. I personally have been in the talent training space, coaching, training, etc. Since '97. I really feel old when I say that, as it tells me how long it's been. But I love it. I love what we do. I believe that our organization has worked with both small and large organizations, from the Fortune 10 all the way to mom and pop organizations and startups. So we have a team across the country and a limited team around the globe, but we also have coaches and trainers and OD experts around the globe that support us in delivering the most cutting edge and progressive training design, training delivery, and coaching and employee development solutions. So today, I want to say thank you to the Whitmore's Consulting Group for inviting folks onto the call with us. And I also want to introduce you to Donna. So Donna is our expert today. And Donna is always modest when she talks about her experience, what makes her the expert. So I'm going to do my best to share with you just what a privilege it is to have Dr. Dennis on the call with us today. Donna is an executive coach and a facilitator with literally more than 2,000 coaching hours. She is a master trainer because she has facilitated so many sessions that at this point you could say, hey, can you show up tomorrow? And she'd be like, sure, what do you want me to talk about? Poof, I'm there, let's do this. So she's worked with senior managers, boards of both small and large organizations, governmental organizations, not-for-profit organizations, and academia. Her experience spans both global companies within a diverse range of industries, including financial services, insurance, medical device, pharmaceuticals, petroleum, multinational conglomerates, and a large variety of mid-sized and small businesses as well. So Dr. Dennis, in the reason that she is speaking with us today is because she has a real passion for succession planning. And in fact, when I asked her, I said, so how many years would you say you have experience with this? She said, oh my. That just, when I say that out loud, it just sounds unreal. So what she shared with me was 30 plus years. And so Donna, what would you share with our audience today that expresses why you're the expert on succession planning and how you came to have all this experience?
Well, thanks, Anissa, and I know who I'm going to call on my bad days when I need a little reminder that I've done some good. There you go. Well, the reason the slide has corporate experience and just those 3 bullets, I started out. I live in the Princeton, New Jersey area where there is no longer a David Sarnoff Research Labs for RCA, because General Electric bought them and then they eventually transitioned to SRI. But I started out doing training there and quickly got into the GE world. And for those of you that know anything about succession, that would have probably been early 80s. It was a marvelous place to learn. They had a whole team. GE was about 350,000 employees at that time, and a whole team within the HR. There were 25,000 HR people, just to give you scope here. So I was just one of the many people that got to learn more about succession planning. So it was great foundational training. Moved on and had pretty much full responsibility for starting up and doing succession at 2 more companies. And you just learn so much when you actually do it. And one of the things I learned is that even though you may have those deep skills in talent management, it's an area where partnering with line managers, with HR, generalists, the business partners, is so critical, and I think was one of my biggest learnings. And at the same time, you need to develop some expertise if you're the one that's running it in the areas of assessments, and I'm going to be speaking more to that later, but that's why that little bit of information is also on the slide, that I decided to become a member of the American Psychological Association, which then means I have an ethical code of ethics that I belong to and have to represent, and also that I'm knowledgeable about what good assessments look like. So I think that's enough about me, and that gives you a little sense of, and the thing that we want to do first here is get to know you a little bit, and we can do that through a poll. We'd like to learn more about why are you and or your company interested in succession planning right now? Why, you know, and what would that look like? So Anissa, I understand you're going to
I've
help.
just launched the poll.
Great.
So we already have some folks that are responding. Looks like one of the primary reasons is to identify qualified leaders. We have quite a few that are saying, well, our primary, if I have to rank it, is other. So for those of you who are selecting other, let us know. One of the things that we take great deal of care about when we are designing our webinars is we want to know what it is that will make the webinar useful for you. We want at the end of this hour for you to say, well, that was well worth my lunch hour. I took away something that is actionable. I took away something that I did not know. And in order for us to really make that happen, we want to hear what exactly are those others? What are your comments? What are your questions? What is it that has inspired you to be with us today? And if we can provide those tips, strategies, etc., or answer those questions during our call today, we will. So right now it looks like we've slowed down. So I am going to hit close, and let's see what we've got here. It should share the poll. Did it share the poll? Okay. Well, we have 78% said their reason that they're interested is to identify qualified leaders. 0% said avoid hiring headaches. 13% said knowledge capital transfer. Number 4, alleviate investor board concerns. No one said that was the reason. And then finally, we had a handful of about 10% that said, we're interested for other reasons. So let me open my chat box real quick, and we'll just read off and see if there's any other. Oh, there's the question. There we go. All right. Launching it. There it is. Okay. We have one. Thanks, Kim, for posting your question. It says, our long-term senior supervisors are leaving within 5 years, and we need to identify the next up and coming leaders. And it looks like our other folks have said something similar. So fantastic. Thank you.
Well, that's very helpful, and I'm happy. The whole business of identifying qualified leaders is, oh my goodness, are we okay?
Yes.
I was hearing some background noise there. The whole qualified leaders piece is a big theme of what we're going to talk about here, and so it sounds like we're on the right track for you. So when we think of succession planning, it kind of chunks out into 7 areas. And the first one is that it's, and we're going to go through all these in detail, so you can kind of read the slide, but tying it to your whole talent management program, making sure it's tied to your business goals and objectives. And there's a big discussion that needs to happen with line managers and HR and anybody else that's got a stake in this about just what do you mean by potential? And what are we going to do with the millennials now, because they have a different perspective about career development? And then we want to really focus on, again, what do we mean by leadership? Different companies, different ways of thinking about it. What are you going to do in terms of a review process? And that can be, some people say, look, I just don't have the staff or the time, but we want to do something. And other people are still doing a process that's maybe akin to what General Electric and others, I know Pepsi has a pretty comprehensive process that really does run over, a fair amount of time and energy for the team. And it's the old adage of what we measure, or what gets measured gets done. So we want to think about those metrics as well. Well, here's the facts, though. Much as we say that it's important, and here we're saying 85% in this Deloitte survey said not only important, it's urgent, but we only get 14% of the companies saying that they think they even do an excellent job. So a lot of room for improvement there. We're clear that there's shortages for good leadership. In fact, we know that many leaders we put into positions don't last. We know they just kind of crash and burn, or we're disappointed. Maybe they're not terrible and we don't have to ask them to leave, but they aren't living up to the potential we thought they would. So it's interesting that while we all know how important leaders are to productivity, to engagement, to people staying, I mean, you probably have all done an activity in a training program where you did what are the best leaders like and what are the worst leaders like. And people are pretty universal about knowing what they want in a good leader, but they don't always seem to end up selecting that. So when you identify qualified leaders as your primary reason for showing some interest in this course, it's or this webinar, excuse me, it's amazing because you're right in sync with what it's about. But are we doing it right when we look at some of these numbers? So we've got another quick poll, kind of find out where are you in the process now of doing succession management in your organization. Is it non-existent or reactive? Kind of, if we know somebody's leaving and they're important, like a senior manager or whatever, we quickly get excited and figure out we need to do it. So it's very ad hoc, very reactive. Inconsistent, maybe it depends on who the senior manager is, how excited they get about it, and how their process is. Or have you standardized some processes and you're kind of got some buy-in from your line people? Is it a pretty transparent process where people know that there's a succession process or a talent management, something where they know that they're being considered as a high-performing person? Or have you got it really integrated with your business objectives, with executive engagement? Because if your executives don't put priority on this, then probably it's not happening. So Anissa, how are we doing?
So we are moving forward. Thank you, everyone, for responding. Donna, between you and I, the answers that we've provided were actually for poll number 3, but I think that we're still going to get, and that's with our technology, so my apologies. But I think we're still going to get a clear understanding of where the folks on the call are, what's really important to them. And so where we are now, it looks like we're slowing down on the responses. We have the largest percentage of folks saying that their primary challenge is there's too much change in the organization already, or too much change. And from my experience, that's going to mean turnover. It's going to mean changing. Many organizations are changing from on-site management to virtual teams
Sure.
in so many different ways, outsourcing certain responsibilities, outsourcing entire departments. And HR in particular is constantly having to keep up with that change. So succession management and succession planning oftentimes has a disjointed, oh, look, we've got this great idea, oh, bummer, we can't start it till next year.
Right.
And some of the other folks are answering the challenges. It looks like we can close that out. Thank you, everyone. And let me see if I can share this time. There, I was able to share. Okay, so the challenges, 30% said boomers retiring. And in fact, quite a few here have said, you are correct, Pamela. Thank you for your feedback. Pamela said, need another box on poll 3. We don't have any of these challenges and have a succession management process and use Workday for talent reviews. So excellent, Pamela. Good to hear that you actually, you guys are moving forward in that direction. For other folks, lack of time. I hear that consistently with clients. A certain percentage are saying millennials are not staying, which means the succession planning strategy that's being deployed is not attending to their needs and developing them them and their managers, we should say, in a way that is inspiring them to hang out. And then finally, most folks, Donna, have said too much change in the organization.
Yeah, yeah. And it just stretches everybody. I've never, in all my 30 plus years, the amount of work people are putting in, the average day's work, long hours, 24/7. Technology has made you so much more accessible. So that all figures into, can we get the time and the ability? And now we've got the boomers leaving, but the millennials not necessarily wanting to hang around and fill those positions. And even if we could, if we're restructuring constantly, who do we put in those positions? And so let me take you on to, if we go back to those keys to success, the first one said, build it around your talent management process. So if you're already doing using competencies as you describe jobs, we want to get it wrapped into the same process. You don't have to use competencies, but if you're already there for job descriptions and performance management, then it makes sense to take those right into the talent succession management process. And we use it for training. We send people to training for figuring out the whole ways their skill development happens. So again, just a different graphic that might be helpful to you. And if you do a little search in Google, you can get the studies where these came from. But it just is saying that essentially competencies make a good foundation for taking this on up into succession management, because it's something your workforce already knows about. So, oopsie, I keep doing a double click there. If you don't have the competencies available, they're available lots of places these days. You can buy lists, they're built into software. You can get them from different associations. I remember SHRM had some great ones for HR, and they may still. I'm now probably the last 10, 15 years I've been doing consulting, so I don't need to take on that responsibility like I used to internally, but we just built them right out of some of the association type, the finance people or whatever. So we want to look to at competencies in those buckets like individual contributors, managers, executives, and start thinking about how you're going to use them to assess talent. So that probably is pretty basic, and you probably already know it, but I just need to say it as a foundational thing. And even as we...
This piece, Pamela, who is on the call, says they use talent reviews. And Pamela, you're listening in, let us know. Is that something that you would recommend to your colleagues that are on the call? Are you guys finding that that is a supportive methodology and resource? And when you say, Donna, buy lists, buy software, join associations, you know, sometimes when I'm talking to clients about succession planning that are in HR, one of the biggest challenges is simply simplifying this process. And two slides earlier, when we were looking at this, the Burson diagram, I mean, it's as complicated as an atom bomb. and I think
this one.
that one. Well, one of the things that I'd like for folks to take away is there is a best practice approach, which is all of the pieces that come together to make a comprehensive approach to ensure the future leaders are competent to take the organization to the next level. And then there's what can we do now to address our current state so that we're moving the ball to the next level, even if it's just the first thing. So by the end of our conversation today, Donna, I'll want to come back to if an organization could take only a couple of these steps or a single step this year. I want to make sure that we're also chunking it down so that there's a critical pathway to easy implementation over the next 3 years, let's say.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a worthy goal because, again, tying to the lack of time that people have. Let me go back up where I flipped back. So step two, the second key, a business review. Now, if you're, you know, this again is basic kind of stuff, but if I'm in a startup, the competencies are going to look different than if I'm in, you know, growing like crazy. I talked to a friend of mine in a company that's maybe around 10, 15,000 employees right now. And a couple of years ago, they were 2,000 employees. And so think of all the hiring they've done and just trying to get people aligned with the culture and how we want to do things here and all the rest. So we need to get tied to here, where are we? What are we trying to do from a business point of view? And then we also want to think about, well, what is it we're known for? What's our mission? Are we a real innovator kind of company? Or do people purchase from us, use our services because of our high quality? Are we known for our customer focus? So again, I like to talk, I don't know how many of you remember Southwest Airlines when they first started out, and Herb Kelleher was the CEO. And if you've ever seen Herb in any kind of video, or maybe you worked for him or you knew, you know, what he was like, he had a very different kind of leadership style that was fun-loving and crazy in some ways. And I remember talking to oops, I'm sorry, that's my finger again, an HR person there, and she said, oh, I left the company I was at because my boss told me my laugh sounded like a cackle. And I wanted to go somewhere where I could laugh and have fun, but we still got a heck of a lot done. So if you've got this high customer service results and yet it's also a playful, fun, loving culture, you want to hire people then that are going to obviously thrive in that environment. And I knew when I heard them talking about it that wouldn't be the right fit for me. So again, I know this is 101 for those of you that do a lot of hiring, but we want to make sure we've got that business piece in line.
And to add a little, you know, for a lot of clients that come to us for, sometimes it's consulting around how do we create our strategy, but oftentimes it's how do we sell a succession planning strategy to the executive team. Lots of folks in HR recognize that in order for them to be a strategic member of the executive team, they have to be able to look into the future of the organization and then make a case for the solutions that they, as human resources professionals, know the organization needs to implement in order to be ready for that future. You know, perfect example is that we have a client that was in the, gosh, I can't remember. It's a computer. ram that is pretty much going extinct. And I know I'm not, for technical folks, you guys can laugh at me. I don't remember the exact terminology of what this piece is. But basically, the founder of the company created great success with this invention. And he's had a very, very difficult time letting it go. And part of his HR VP's strategy was to support him in making the transition mentally from this particular way of selling is no longer going to be the future, and thus we need leaders that are have certain competencies that are different than the current leader. And part of that business review means looking at where does the company want to go, and what are the competencies that are going to be required of our leaders in order to get there, and then making the case to the current leaders who believe, for example, the way they do things is the way things should be done, when in fact the future may not line up with that.
Got it. And you're right, taking us to the next key here, and that is get that forecast of who we're going to need and to be able to execute on the strategy and the future that we say we want. And so that's just an assessment of, and some of you, when you said you've got boomers leaving, you know who those people are. So you're already seeing where the gaps are there. And then we're finally getting to the part where we can start having those conversations about talent. So one of the things that's critical to getting a good succession or talent management process in place is to define what you mean by potential. So if I'm saying, that these entry level or mid-level, my mid-level people can go on up to senior levels, my entry level people can make it up. Who are they, and what do we mean by potential? So let me give you a little more on the word potential here. So it's looking at people that you think are capable of being or becoming something else, So I may be great, to Anissa's comment a minute ago, really good at my current job. Maybe I'm one of the best salespeople in the organization, and now you want to move me up to sales management, and I'm not as good at that because I thought that all it took was being great at my current job. But we've got to look at that future, and that's where the rub comes here about being able to grow and just what are we looking for there. So we have disagreements awful, and many of you use a performance potential grid like this, and they make the mistake of saying a good performer now is going to be a good performer in the next job. And that's why we need that competency process, and why we're looking at defining just what is it that next job requires. And it may be in your job descriptions, and this is where I think some of our failures are in the beginning, when I said we know that sometimes we know how important this is, but we don't select the right people. I don't know about all of you, but I have learned over my years that line managers can, and even we can, fall in love with certain candidates, certain people, because they are doing an outstanding job right now in their current job, and therefore start to really believe that they can do a great job in the next job. It gets very emotional, because now I really want you to believe that too. If I'm trying to convince you, I am really going to be pushing for selling you on the idea that this person can be every bit the performer you want them to be. In one of my corporate jobs, we had a position in a general management level where it was turning over every single year. and they hired an outside company to do the it was an interview process. It wasn't using any kind of assessments, but they made their recommendations. They gave them IQ tests. They, these were terrific people. They were absolutely high-performing people in their current jobs. They moved them into the general management job, and within a year, they were looking for another position for them because they were not making it. So the emotional component here can be pretty strong, and so we want to get you past people believing that performance does equal potential. So some other things we might.
Oh, go ahead. Best practices that I've seen organizations do is take 10%. If you'll go back to that slide before.
Sure.
And look at, so an organization that has 2,000 employees will have 10% that, or 200 that end up, or approximately following in that very high potential. But I've seen a lot of organizations that aren't prepared to put 200 through a really comprehensive training program.
Right.
So for our larger organizations, we'll oftentimes see them take 20% of their top 10%. For really large organizations, we actually support them in setting up an application process to where initially, I can remember with one of our clients, we did, and this was a Fortune 10 company, we did a process where initially the executives and leaders of the different groups nominated those that they felt like met the specific number according to the reviews, and simply said, hey, you've been nominated, you're going to join this training. And we had a lot of great participation, but there was also a sense of, I'm so busy, why are they making me do this? So we talked them into the next year, we talked them into allowing those same candidates, the same company, the same nomination could occur. However, folks had to apply. And folks could nominate themselves. And then the managers would respond to, okay, I've got 10 people in my groups that have now been nominated. Let me whittle it down. I get 3 from my group to send to the program, or whatever the metrics are. And what ended up happening that second year are these folks were so excited about the potential to grow their career. It turned from, why are they making us do this, to, what do I have to do to be in that group? How much do I need to perform? What specifically do I need to change so that next year I'm there? And that's one of the things that I know here shortly you're going to talk a little bit about managing the millennial group and their career expectations and career development.
This is a perfect example. Yeah.
And it is a perfect example. How we frame our employee development programs will predict whether or not someone wants to participate or whether or not someone begrudgingly participates because they don't want retaliation. And so thinking in terms of if we have 180 employees, you're looking at 18 to 20 that you want to put through a program. If you have 1,000 plus, you're looking at the top 20% of your top 10%. For at least the initial. We do have other organizations who will do it departmentally. For every department, they take their top 10% and then do cross-organizational training as well. So excellent. We have so many clients that use this 9-box. Donna, this is simple.
Yep.
Why don't more organizations implement a 9-box across the organization?
I don't know. And some
barrier. And
so you can go online and Google this 9-box grid and find out that it comes in 4 boxes if 9 is too many for you. It comes in 12 if 9 isn't enough for you. The idea, and I will sometimes, just when I'm teaching a coaching class, for example, have people just put their own staff into the boxes and just, sitting there quietly by yourself, write the names of the people that belong in each of those boxes. And then how would you coach them if they're at risk? And you might say, gee, well, wouldn't I just terminate them? Well, maybe something's happened and you just feel like the job changed. They got moved into something they hadn't planned on. So maybe it's a different coaching model than but it could end up being maybe this is wrong fit kind of thing, or something else is they've, something has happened that's caused them to not be the same person. With our very high potential people, when it comes to coaching, sometimes we overlook them because they're doing so well that we think they're just fine, and or that we can have the tendency to give them so much that we're burning them out. So the coaching messages can be quite different. I just feel like this tool has a lot of uses, and from an individual to a corporate to a function. And it doesn't mean if I end up in one of those boxes. Well, in fact, let me tell you a personal painful story. When I was running succession planning, I reported to the senior HR person, and she reported to the CEO. And our definition included you had to be able to move 2 layers above where you are to be considered very high potential. So I didn't ever think I would ever want to be a CEO. I didn't even want to be the head of HR because my expertise is on that organization management, development, succession planning side. And so I was happy in the job I was in. I really didn't want anything else. I did want to grow, but I wasn't going to be. And so when I filled the chart out for the HR department, it was clear that I couldn't put my own name up in the very high potential. And, in a way, your ego gets in the way a little bit sometimes, and you kind of say, well, wait a minute, I'm a high potential. But if you've defined it as being able to move 2 levels, then, and you're not doing that, then you're not in that definition. So lots of different uses, lots of different ways of applying this. So let me give you some other things that we know people use, and that is everything from some history. Yes, it's good to know what the prior experience has been, but you might also want to know personality. Certainly people have to have a certain level of intelligence. We know that there's no correlation between high IQ and, excellent leadership, but there is some level that people need to take on the complexity of leading or doing a particular job. So there's leadership I'm going to talk about some of these other things when we get, but learning agility is coming up big these days because there have been lots of studies now are showing up with the correlation to high-performing people and their ability to take in feedback and learn and shift. So functional knowledge, I'm reading more articles now about CEOs don't want the C-suite to just be deep functional knowledge in one area. They want people that can, even if I'm in IT, understand what it would be like for if we were talking about a particular change or process for the marketing people or the HR people or somewhere else, to have some sense of the total organization. So I want to just show you briefly, if you don't want to, Anissa talked earlier about if you don't want to get too complicated on a whole succession process, even doing something like this, where you just figure out, well, I do care about how people learn. I do care about these 4 competencies in our company. Everybody's held accountable. I want people to have some experience. And then I want to figure out what is the long-term potential. So that second line, just so you know, the red bars of low, 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 but still we've got them marked as having some high potential. Those were interns, and so they felt like that there was some option there, or an intern. So just as a tool, that could be a simpler thing to do if you just want to map out where are people.
And
okay.
This combined with the 9-box.
9-box, yep.
Can use the 9-box, and then HR begins the process of really putting folks into a spreadsheet so that they can evaluate, what is it we want to accomplish strategically, and which of our employees can support that, and that we want to hang on to and make sure we develop. Yep. Donna, we actually have a couple of questions. Teo,
good.
I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Teo. asks, do you recommend to inform employees that they are considered hypo or high performers? And I, of course, have an opinion about that, but I'll ask you first, Donna.
Yeah, and I have my own personal opinion. And what I say to people is, this is something you've got to believe in. If you want total transparency, then it can't just be a quiet conversation off, with the person. In my mind, it can't. I think it has to do with your ethics and your integrity and what it is you're trying to do. Now, employees have to understand that just because I'm showing up in a box on the 9 box this year, that I'm guaranteed a place there next year and forevermore until, and that means I'll be the next one to be promoted. So how you frame it up to them, what the process is. A lot of people are saying it's just easier to say you're in a talent pool of people that we value highly and feel have the potential to take on more growth. That does not promise any promotions or anything else. Other people say not in our culture, it would just be deadly. So they decide not to tell them. And it's kept to just within the management ranks. But I think the important piece is that you've got to have the conversation as a senior team somewhere in there and come up with what you want to do. It works both ways. It's just a question of how you implement it.
Absolutely.
Does that answer
I
it?
have found, yep, go ahead. I've found that there's organizations that we've worked with that have done it both ways.
Yep.
I have found that those that are transparent tend to foster a level of competitiveness, particularly when they lay out a career journey within their organization.
Yeah.
That encourages those who didn't make the hypo cut to be more proactive in talking to HR, talking to their managers, hey, I get it. You don't think I make that cut. What do I need to do to get there? And that piece is a coaching conversation that oftentimes does not happen without some type of, what do you mean I'm not in that group? I want to be. What is that going to look like? And that for HR folks is a good thing. And like you said, though, Donna, it has to be framed correctly.
Yeah.
I've also seen organizations who will say, well, we don't want to leave anyone out, so let's just do this for all of these folks. And then what happens is the training and the pieces get watered down, and instead of really being strategic, we're tossing people into some training room and hoping something sticks. So I think that there's ideal, and then there's what's our crappy phase one. If we don't have anything, getting people into training and development plans for themselves is important. Particularly, I think you're going to talk about the millennials here shortly.
Yeah, I want to get over to those folks right now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to skip this and let me get over here to the millennials. So yes, they're coming, they're here. They're the major part of our workforce and will continue to be. And we know some things about them. We can go out and find studies, and we all have had our own experiences. I love the outside of this blueprint, kind of like the, just fun, fast, fulfilling as kind of keywords to remember. So show them what you have to offer, grow them. And I think the hardest one for all of us is to let go and embrace new ways of thinking. That doesn't mean every one of their ideas is going to be something you can do, but you at least want to be able to listen. In the very beginning, the first few millennials that came into the workforce, I would actually hear people saying, oh, I refuse to work with them. Somebody needs to teach them what the workforce is supposed to look like. And as time has gone on and as more and more of them come, and they have more influence, we're seeing, people saying, oh, well, wait a minute, why couldn't we, do some kind of project that would be good in the community, because that's something that they value a lot. So we see things like, in the show, we see people trying to figure out just what would our whole total package look like if we were really paying attention to what the millennials think about. And onboarding, what's that look like? Would we do it differently? What can we offer in terms of development? It doesn't have to be formal training programs, but can I give you a stretch assignment? Can I have you go, call on a customer with somebody else to at least see what that looks like? And then stretch them a little bit more. But the idea being of, really staying open to embracing new ways of thinking and sort of checking our own process and saying, well, what makes it be the fact that we have to do it the way it was done when the boomers changed everything. And when they basically came into the organization, the boomers had a tremendous impact on the work. So we've got the same thing going on. We're in the midst of that change. And so if we can get this talent pool idea is probably what will work best. I have seen some articles about tour of duty kinds of things, like the military uses that language, but basically an assignment somewhere. Presumably many millennials love to travel, so if you've got a global organization or the ability to move people around a little bit, that might be appealing. But it's, really staying open to and talking to. They've had terrific relationships with their parents and grandparents and family members, and they want to sometimes have more attention from their bosses in the same way, which I hear some bosses say, gosh, I don't have the time. But on the other hand, if you don't find ways, it doesn't have to be a lot of time. Sometimes it has to be the shift to sending an IM or something like that. So I don't want to put the whole focus here. I just wanted you to, have a tiny bit. And I want to move on to leadership because we're going to run out of time. And I know that could be your biggest area of interest. So
I want to share something real quick that
sure.
We had asked Pamela earlier if she found the talent reviews helpful. And thanks for sharing, Pamela. She writes, we find talent reviews quite useful and hold them at all levels. From those reviews, we're able to identify potential and development needs of candidates on our succession plans. We're also able to track how well we're including diverse candidates in our talent pools. Doing it in Workday also allows us to look at talent across the whole organization and search for talent internally to fill positions. So we're not even touching on how a good succession management strategy supports so many other organizational goals.
You're right. Yeah. No, this is a challenge to do this in an hour and to even hit the top level and of what we're doing. So thanks for sharing that though, Pamela. That's excellent. So with this leadership piece, I particularly like this model. So I thought I'd share it with you. So we talked earlier, cognitive abilities, of course, people have to have a certain amount of ability there. Personality characteristics, there's research on what are we looking for with leaders. I saw an interesting, if you are familiar with the Hogan assessments, an interesting blog the other day about charismatic leaders and how we are drawn to that very charismatic person and often think that's our leader. And looking at charisma versus learning ability and that ability to listen and take feedback. And sometimes there are leaders that are extremely good at working the politics, at working up, at knowing how to get the attention of those above them, but they don't necessarily do a good job of working down and building strong teams that are going to really produce the results for the organization. So getting clear on what it is we're looking for, and then what functional and technical skills do we need? If our CEO is going to say, I need people in the C-suite who are multi-talented, who've had some exposure to other functions, to, don't just have deep skills in one area, then that's something that has to happen along the path. Talked a little about the learning ability, and here again, the charisma discussion was extremely interesting because it's where it gets emotional about what a good leader is, that people will go to the mat on something like that sometimes. And yet we see that high failure rate with leaders, and maybe some of that is due to the fact that we're letting emotion drive our decisions and not enough. And I've had a tough time in my career convincing senior managers, once they've met someone that they really believe in, it's almost impossible to shift their thinking. So I think we got to train them from a little bit earlier on in their careers. So we can use assessments, and I really want to make a strong pitch for this because human beings, whether it's confirmation bias, where we're looking for information that confirms our point of view, or other just, we know now from studying psychology that people have unconscious biases. So we want to put as much science into this as we can, and I think that will help us shift over and do a better job with these decisions. So all of these things can be done through assessments. That doesn't mean I'm suggesting you use them. I think it's just knowing what's available and what would work in your organization.
And on
Yep.
assessments, I find that it can be one of the stage one initiatives that many executives can get behind, and that is that each generation has their own perspective, and just as we've talked about the millennials, many of the boomers believe that we don't need anything fancy. Let's just get some good people in here,
Yep.
and if they'll just do what I do, we're going to be fine, right? And then they want to mentor these folks and say, hey, this is how you get the job done. Just watch me. But what happens is that transfer of knowledge doesn't happen, nor does it include that strategic focus of what's next for the organization. We've done a number of job benchmarking assessments where the job itself talks about the position. That particular leader, as well as a few key stakeholders and our a consultant get together. They talk about what is it that makes a superstar in this particular role, and then they come up with no more than, I want to say it's 4 or 5 top competencies, and then no more than a total of 10, and they must prioritize them. And with the assessment, then they can have this is what this job requires, and then have a scientific assessment that anyone internal or external can take that assessment, and it gives them an overlay. How likely is this person to be successful at this next level, or how likely is this person to be successful if they're coming into the company? And it's one of those that, because it provides a report that's in black or white and compares the candidates, it allows executives and other leaders to see, oh, I just saved myself a whole lot of headache and heartache because I was going to hire this person, but according to her personality, it's not likely she's going to do well in this job. Give you a real quick example. We have a client who was hiring an executive assistant that he also wanted her to help him manage some of his real estate. And she didn't like people. And she said she did, but honestly, she really just wanted to work on the computer and wanted to work on the technical aspects of the job. And he was going to put her also sometimes at the front desk. And she was going to say yes, but ultimately we know because of the assessment, it wasn't going to be a good fit to her. It did not play to her strengths. Once he got the benchmark, he was able to say, you know what, I really want to work with her, but this is not the right role. And assessments have the ability to quickly ascertain what are the competencies, where does this person fall in their likelihood or propensity to be successful in the role. And that's something that HR folks can find their leaders can get excited about.
That's right. And the thing here is that there now been, and the technology is, if people that have been around a long time say, oh, we tried that once and it didn't work, the scoring algorithms, the research, the science behind these things has gotten better and better and better, and the top companies are getting behind it, both to identify and to develop. So give it a second look. I'm just going to say this slide is way too complicated for us to talk about it now.
We will send the slides.
Yeah,
so
no,
wants to have a conversation about this.
Yeah, it's not that you need to do it this way. It just means that a review process has to be mapped out along with a timeline. And that comes after lots of other things. And again, if you want to keep this really simple, this is one of the ways you do it, is say, okay, all we can afford to do for a year or two at least is, have that talent review, have those conversations, and we're going to do that this time of the year because our leaders are in town. We're going to use the 9-box. This is where you get a chance to just map out exactly what you want to do. Here's how we're going to measure and follow up. And we'll continue to build this system over time. So bottom line, we really believe that succession management ought to be done in some sort of way so that you can build that diverse pool. And another key is, though, executive ownership. So don't get out too far ahead of your line managers and think that you can come up with this terrific system and then try to pull them in. They need to buy in and support for it to really work well. So Anissa, I did not get us to an early stop here, but I know you want to turn this into a little bit of...
Thank you. I think it's really important that our webinars are meaningful and provide things that you folks that took time to join us find useful. So one of the things that we know about succession planning is that there's a lot to it. And that can cause a lot of frustration and even stagnation when you're looking at what do we do, how do we do it, where do I start? So one of the things that we'd like to offer you is what we're calling our Fastpass strategy session. And what I mean by that is you're going to jump ahead all the convoluted complication of a comprehensive succession plan and have a conversation with either Donna or myself, and we will support you in creating a one-page actionable strategy. How do we drill it down to the most simplest actionable strategies that your organization and culture must do now in order to close the gaps, identify your potential leaders, and then take the first step or the next step, depending on where you are on your journey, of ensuring you have a strong bench of ready now leaders. And so Donna has put together a 60-minute agenda, the Fastpass. We start with company position and predictable future growth challenges. We're going to move into clarify. We want to make sure you have clarity about what are the key opportunities and most critical gaps in our talent situation, and actionable. What's 3 immediate actionable steps? And then finally, what are 3 of our primary long-term goals, and what are the 3 projects that line up with that? That's going to allow you to take something back to your team and say, okay, we have our first 3 actionable items. Let's move forward with this. And that is something that both Donna and I would be happy to support you. Turnkey is going to be picking up the tab so that there's no charge. If that hour consultation would be of service, it would be our honor to support you in that way. So I know that we are coming up to the last few minutes. If there's a question that we have not answered, please don't hesitate to put your question in your box there. My email also is, yep. There you go. My email also is anissa@turnkeycoachingsolutions.com. You are welcome to shoot me an email. And if I don't get back to you right away, send it again in case it got buried. Here shortly, I know Sheila's going to be sending out feedback forms. We want your feedback. What kind of webinar would be useful to you? If we were to invite Donna back, what questions, when we invite Donna back, what questions or elements would you like for her to spend some more time on, drill down on? How can we support you? So let us know how we did. Let us know how we can improve. I'm always open to that feedback. So any other questions before we go? I do want to say, Teo provided some feedback that said, I find that to overcome the issue around cost is to create a track for hypos with a defined time, with defined areas or competencies to develop in a specific time frame, 18 to 24 months. Have you seen organizations be effective that way?
Not quite that specifically, but I do think it's a terrific idea. I think the structure would be great.
I've had some organizations who have not outlined this is a career path that someone can take within our company, and there's certain milestones that they can achieve, and sometimes they have a timeline. They say, okay, this program, you're going to go through the next 3 years, which frankly, even though many folks will say, we have a company that we work with out in California, and they have a 6-month program that we put a new cohort through every year. It's a really intensive program, but what's happened is the same folks want to be in it again, and so we develop the next level and the next level and the next level, and that seems to be very effective as well. Karen asked, any assessments that you would recommend that have been really true or accurate identifiers of skills?
Well, I don't know about skills so much. My expertise would probably fall more over on the personality, motivation, the learning agility. I think to get to skills, you're going to need, and did you really mean skills like functional? What did you mean by a skill, I guess? Maybe we could talk about that offline.
Yeah, Karen, don't hesitate to reach out via email. I can go back to my team. I know that Roger Blaker, who is our senior executive coach and senior program manager for Turnkey, he uses an assessment with our clients from Targeted Training International. And that particular one has an acumen assessment. I also know that the job benchmarking program that I mentioned earlier
that
is so
does,
customized,
yeah.
right, that we're able to identify skills to a degree. Karen just wrote, no, personality is what I meant.
Then I would put a big star next to Hogan. The Hogan assessments are really solid. And there are lots of other ones depending on, you know, people's appetite for it and so forth. But Hogan
use a lot of the everything disc, primarily because it's effective, but also it's useful, because long after we're gone, an organization can still read the report.
Yeah, and they can understand them.
Yeah, exactly.
They really, the language is simple, and that's one of those instruments that's been around for 40 or 50 years, where the algorithm for scoring it got improved a couple of years ago, and oh my golly, I have not ever used that in the last 5 years anyway, where anybody has said, oh no, that isn't me. Everybody sees some aspect of themselves. They may not be totally bought in, but they will definitely see it resonates for them. They can read it, they can understand it, they can apply it. So good suggestion. Excellent. To use DISC, everything DISC.
It looks like I think we have all of our questions answered.
Great.
If we missed anything, or if there was a particular piece that you'd like to know more about, don't hesitate to call us. If you'd like to take advantage of our Fastpass strategy session, shoot me an email and we'll hook you up. So Donna, really fantastic. Thank you for cramming so much into a single hour.
Yeah,
I think that it was very helpful.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic afternoon. Let us know how we may support you. Have a great day.